All right, Brian Steele, cross-examination.
Agent,
Hey, good afternoon, sir.
good to see you. Can I ask you some questions, starting with State's Exhibit number 180E, which should be the April 26, 2015 discussion and conversation that you gave to the jurors?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, do you know that date to be a shooting of a bus or a tour bus?
I do.
All right. And is it fair to say that the locations that you put up in front of the jurors, entitled The Vault or the Compound Establishment and 285, those are all Atlanta locations? Is that fair to say?
They are.
And Jeffrey Williams, you know I represent Mr. Williams, right?
I do, sir.
And Jeffrey Williams' cell phone was not in Atlanta during that date and those times. Is that fair to say, according to the records?
Yeah, that's correct. His device.
And his device would have been in the city of Baton Rouge, state of Louisiana.
Yeah, there's two different devices. One's the YSL, the 8553. That one's in Baton Rouge. And then there's another one, 2920, with a 504 area code. That one's in Miami.
On April 26, 2015?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, how many contacts, if you were asked, first of all, let's be fair to the jurors. You did not personally investigate this case, didn't interview witnesses and things like that. Is that fair to say?
100%.
You were just tasked or requested, and your agency, but specifically you, by the district attorney's office in Fulton County to look at certain records that they gave to you.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And then they gave you from those records what they specifically wanted you to target, like this phone number on this date or this time, et cetera. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
And then you would do what I think you call a draft report, and then send it over to the district attorney's office and say, here's what I think you asked me to do, here's my draft report. And they would say, actually amend this or do this, or we wanted you to do this, and then they send it back to you, and eventually you get a final report.
Yes, sir, that's how it goes.
And the person that you dealt with at the district attorney's office, maybe more, but at least District Attorney Adrian Love, is that fair to say?
I dealt with her and Ms. Hilton for their drafts and final.
Now, going back to my question, were you ever asked, or do you know, dealing with the April 26, 2015 date, according to the records that you analyzed, how much contact Jeffrey Williams' phone had with any of the other phones? And by that I mean Mr. Winfrey, Mr. Zachary, Mr. You could help me here if you want to.
McMullen,
Go ahead.
Zachary, Sledge, all of those. No, for this incident, the only toll analysis, meaning who called who at what date and time, is listed in the report itself. So, you know, if you looked at various pages, you'd see this phone had some activity and had it with this phone. So I didn't create a chart with the toll analysis on this date.
How about did I interrupt you?
No, sir.
Were you finished?
Yes, sir.
Okay. For Jeffrey Williams' phone, though, what other phone numbers, according to records, had any contact with the phone number records assigned to, had you assigned them, or the district attorney's Jeffrey Williams' phone?
Yeah, the two devices, again, one was the 2920 number. Again, that one was located in Miami. I don't recall any of the calls to or from that number. And then there was the 8553, the YSL Enterprises phone number, the one that's in Baton Rouge. During this time period, I can take a quick look. But I was not asked to analyze calls between those numbers other than what's in the report.
Okay. And the number that you said is in Miami, is that the 2920 number?
It is, yes, sir.
Okay. And is that number, do you know if it's been designated? If it's not, just say, I don't know, or to a man named Brian Williams, also known as Birdman. Do you know that?
That does ring a bell now that you brought that up. Again, my analysis just shows Williams in the phone analysis on page 7.
Okay.
So I don't recall, but I think it may be associated with the Birdman Williams or whatever you would call it.
Okay. And then I think you answered it. I think it's clear, but no calls, contacts, communications that we can tell from the records with Jeffrey Williams' phone or the phone in Baton Rouge. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right. I'd like to now go to what I believe to be State's Exhibit number 532Y, which I think is your report focusing on what I call the Donovan Thomas shooting, killing January 10th and thereabouts, 2015. So if you could focus on that date, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, what year were you asked to review these records, you think?
Probably sometime in early 2023, maybe late 2022, 2022.
So we're talking from January 15th to late 2022, or I'll just make it January 2023, just to make it easy, approximately 8 years.
That's correct.
Now, if you were going, you explained to the jurors that you found out the height of a cell tower. Do you remember that? Explain that to jurors.
I do.
And that was important because you said it's a larger tower, so possibly, I'm not saying you know, it might give more of a range. Is that?
Yes, consistently when we, see towers, the towers with the taller line of sight have more range than the shorter towers.
My question is, did you do that analysis on height for each of the towers that are in play that you discussed with the jurors?
I did it with the majority of the towers, probably not every single tower that was used in that analysis, because again, the height of the tower isn't always important. It can be important if we see something that might be different with the analysis.
And were there other towers that are tall? And if
There are.
yes, are they frequent? Is it the aberration
To have a tower that's 150
in
feet tall?
2015?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say it's an anomaly, but it depends also where the towers are. So towers in downtown Atlanta, most of those were not 150 feet up in the air. We see more of those kinds of towers as you get outside of the city of Atlanta. Most of the towers in Atlanta, there's some that are that tall, and then there's some that are obviously just put on corners and other kinds of things, and they're maybe 15, 20 feet tall.
And did you designate for us in your report the height of each tower that it was employed or used in this case?
I did not.
All right. You could do that, though, if needed?
I could review the records, and if those records, not all the providers keep the height of the tower in their records. Some do not. But if that information was available, I could put it in my report.
And just to be fair, since we're just dealing with the records, how about like maintenance records, like a tower's down? Does that come into your analysis at all today?
Well, we know if a tower's down, it didn't get used, right? Because only the towers that are used are shown up in the CDRs. Also, in part of our trainings and meetings with service providers, as part of our routine business, we learn that obviously it's a big business. So if things go down, that's an emergency situation for the provider, and they get them fixed within hours. So no, we don't typically review maintenance logs because again, we can see the towers that are used because they show up in the call detail records.
So let's say, just for purposes of what you're explaining to us, that a tower is, I don't know, it's been hit or damaged in some way, so it's not usable. How would we, but that tower still comes up on your report, I presume, because you went back and looked at all the towers in 2015, January 10th, 11th, 12th, whatever the dates are, right?
So the towers that show the tower and sector activity were the ones used in the call detail records. So if those were used, we know that those are operational because they're obviously used by the phone at a specific time period on January 10th or 11th. Could there be other towers that are down? Potentially, there could be.
Okay, and I think that's my question, and I'm just saying because the handset or the cell phone really is designed, the whole premise is to get the strongest signal, so we have a clear connection. Is that accurate?
Correct.
And generally, I'm not saying this always is happening, but the strongest symbol could be the closest tower. It doesn't have to be like you explained, but that would make sense to the company building all the towers.
It normally is. Yeah, not always, but normally is.
So if my handset that I'm going to use was closest to a tower, but that's inoperable for whatever reason, my handset would still go to the next potentially closest tower or the strongest signal. True?
That is true. Correct.
But on our diagram, we wouldn't know if a closer tower is unusable, and that's why the handset used a different tower and sector. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah. So again, obviously it's feasible, but in discussions and in the training we received directly from T-Mobile, Verizon, the percentage of towers that go down for maintenance is minimal. I don't recall the exact percentage, but it was very, very small, like less than 1% to 2% of towers are down at any specific time. So could it have happened? I can't say in 2015 that it didn't happen, but again, it wouldn't really change the analysis too much because I'm not saying that a device is at this side, at this location right here. I'm saying it's in this general area, which again is serviced by a tower that we know was used because it's in the records.
Now, do you know what a geofence is?
Yes, sir.
Would you mind explaining that to the jurors?
Yeah, so a geofence is a way to request activity from different providers. So the most common geofence is from Google, to ask Google, hey, provide any and all devices that are within a certain area, a geofence. So you provide a latitude, longitude spot on the Earth and say, hey, provide me every device that's within 100 meters of this one spot I just asked for. And so based on activity on those devices, if it responded with a certain location within your area of interest, Google would say, yeah, hey, these 100 devices were located within your area of interest.
And that doesn't have to be a text message or a telephone call, is that true? From the
Well,
device?
So are you talking in today's 2024 or 2015?
I'm sorry, I'm limiting it to January 10th, 2015.
Yeah, so in January 2015, the cell phone providers were not providing any information for geofences. They just couldn't pull information that way. What they could pull would be a tower dump. So instead of a geofence asking for a spot in an area, we ask, hey, for this address, give me all the towers that service this address, and they could provide the cell phones that use the towers in that area. That's called a tower dump. But in 2015, geofence was not really a thing yet.
Okay, all right. Now, I want to talk with you about some of these records, if you don't mind. Do you remember telling the jurors before a long break that there was a call at approximately 7:29 p.m., January 10th, 2015, from the device or the number that we associate or the record we associate with Demise McMullen's phone to Mr. Jeffrey Williams'
I do, sir.
records? And told the jurors, I believe, that it was a 40-second phone call. Do you remember that? And if you don't,
I do.
Okay. Whose records did you use to get that duration of that call?
So that came from the calling party, which was Demise McMullen, the McMullen phone.
Okay. Did you, and if you need to see it, we're going to show it to you. Did you ever analyze the records associated with Jeffrey Williams on that exact date and time of that call? Did you?
I did.
And tell the jurors what the number of seconds that call shows on Jeffrey Williams' records, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I believe it's 17 seconds. Correct me if I'm 16, 15.
We could show it to you if you want, but I'm going with 17. But
Yeah, I believe it's 17.
But if you want to see it, there's no problem. That's a 30-second gap. And I've asked you about that before, right?
You have, sir.
Can you explain why whose records, if you remember, and this is not a quiz, if you need to see it, Demise McMullen, who keeps his records?
Those Verizon records.
And who keeps the Jeffrey Williams associated records?
Let me just take a quick peek here.
If you look at something, just
Those
say
are
what you're
T-Mobile
looking at.
records.
Okay, just say what you're looking at. Just
Oh, yeah, I referenced 532 Yankee, my PowerPoint analysis, to see that the number associated with Mr. Williams ending in 3904 was a T-Mobile record.
Okay. Do you know why on the T-Mobile record 17 and on the Verizon record of Mr. McMullen 47? And if you do, just say yes or no, and then I'd like you to explain.
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so again, the calling party was the Verizon phone number ending in 6080 associated with Mr. McMullen. And again, that's a 47 seconds. And then the records on the receiving side was the device associated with Mr. Williams, 3904, T-Mobile record. That showed 17 seconds for T-Mobile. 47 for Verizon, 17 for T-Mobile. The difference is when you place a call, so each provider keeps records slightly different, meaning they're not mandated to, in their duration time, that it's only talk time or only time in which voice is transmitted. Verizon keeps their records for what's called seizure time and elapsed time. So seizure time is the time I hit the green button till that call is routed through. Sometimes it takes a while, and then the ring on the other side, and then the voice conversation altogether. So the total time from when the device associated with Mr. McMullen hit the button until that call was terminated, Verizon tracked that whole time as 47 seconds. Thanks, sir.
All right, you guys. So I think this is a very honest witness with no intent to help either party. I think Steele has respect for this witness. And are you guys catching what Steele is getting at? There's two different people we're talking about, Demise McMullen and Jeffrey Williams. They both have different cell phone service providers. Steele asks a question, hey, there's a 17-second call, but there's a 30-second gap if you look at the records between the two service providers for the same call. So Steele, without needing to prompt, gets this witness to explain why that might be. We're about to hear the answer.
T-Mobile, on the other hand, only keeps their records for the time you talk. And so that was 17 seconds. So on Mr. Williams' phone, it showed he picked up the phone and talked for 17 seconds before that device was terminated. So the difference of approximately 30 seconds, again, is the phone routing to the destination. The ring time must have been a combination of 30 seconds.
You said Mr. Williams picked up the phone, just to be fair.
Yeah, the device associated with Mr. Williams, whoever had the device at the time, whenever that was connected.
Now, could it also be where, using those two people, Mr. McMullin hits the send, or I guess the call button, and then Mr. Williams' cell phone records show that it's 17 seconds actually connected to Mr. Williams' associated phone?
Correct.
Okay. Could it be also that Mr. McMullin, whatever, he dropped, I'm making this up, he or whoever had that phone drops the phone, forgot to hit end call? Could it be that as well? And that's where you have the additional time. And if you don't know, just say, I'm not sure.
So both calls, the call is terminated at both ends. So whenever one person hangs up, the call is terminated on both sides, be it T-Mobile or Verizon. So Verizon wouldn't keep their side of the call open if T-Mobile had terminated the call on their side.
All right. Now, you were asked about whether the phone associated with Mr. Jeffrey Williams, it had what I'll call dark, between 7:00 and we have to check me, 7:04 and 7:29. Please check it.
Yeah, I'm finding that here.
And for the jurors, because they're going to have this in their notes, can you just say what you're looking at and what page of the report?
Absolutely. All right, so I'm.
Oop, I caused a buffer. My bad. It was going so clean and smooth, and I opened YouTube to grab the link to Club Classy. Look at me breaking
Again,
stuff.
referencing States Exhibit 532 Yankee, and looking at specifically page 27.
Okay. Would you mind showing that on the screen? Your Honor, it's in evidence. Is that okay to put it on the screen? I'm not. If you need to, you don't have to, but if you need to stand up and point to things, just ask this honorable court if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
While that's being pulled up, so the actual, from what you know by doing your work, the actual time, that 47-second Demise McMullin record from Verizon versus 17-second T-Mobile record from his phone associated or the record associated with Mr. Williams, you fell out that it may be a 17-second
The total voice
connection.
call?
Yes.
Yeah, it's 17 seconds. Yes, sir.
Do you know why it was written on one of your first exhibits, which is behind you, 47 seconds?
Yeah, again, that time came, I take the call at the time from the calling party when I just did the toll analysis. So again, that came from the McMullin phone, which placed the phone call.
Okay, but the jurors need to know, as far as you're concerned, it's a 17-second, not 47-second communication.
Yeah, the voice time of that call is 17 seconds.
All right, thank you. All right, I believe, is this the document that you just referred to, sir?
It is.
All right, and this would be then, Your Honor, we're showing State's Exhibit number,
532 Yankee.
thank you, and it's on page 27. Is that what you
Yes,
asked
sir.
for? All right. Now, there's a gap, and I think I said 7:04, but it's 7:03:39. Is that fair to say?
7:03:39 incoming call, and then the next incoming call is at 7:29 and 30 seconds.
Okay. Now, do you have any, you see the CS on here, a crime scene in the red in the kind of center lower part of what's on the screen for the jurors, the same exhibit number, same page we just announced?
I do.
Do you have any evidence to show the jurors that the handset, according to the records associated with Mr. Williams, was anywhere in the vicinity of that crime scene where Mr. Donovan Thomas was, God forbid, shot during the time of 7:03 and 7:29?
I do not.
Okay. Now, the prosecution asked you, well, I'm going by my memory, but if I said it wrong, just please correct me.
Yes, sir.
WhatsApp, FaceTime, those are not captured by these type of records. You remember that question like that?
That's correct.
All right. And do you have any evidence that FaceTime, WhatsApp, or any other application was being used by that handset during this break in time?
I do not. We can't tell based on the records we received from T-Mobile in 2015 whether any of those devices were used.
All right. Now, I'd like to talk with you about, and I believe it's going to be on the next page, but you handle it. You tell us. From the 729 call that is already for the jurors, and then there should be the next series of calls or connections with Mr. Williams' targeted phone or the phone associated with Mr. Jeffrey Williams, where it is by the number 2. You know what I'm talking about,
I
location
do,
2?
yes, sir.
Can
That's 7:33
Can
and
we
14
turn-
seconds. And that's
All right.
on page 28 of that same exhibit, 532 Yankee.
Your Honor, is it okay to turn to that? Yeah. I believe before you is exactly what you just said, same exhibit, page 28. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, I'd like to talk with you about the 7:33:14 outgoing call from the records of that we're calling associated with Mr. Jeffrey Williams to the Kelvin Treadwell. You see that? What I'm
I
talking
do.
about? Okay. Now, the call before is the 731 call, but it's not on the same diagram. Is that accurate?
That's correct. It was on the previous page, page 27.
All right. I'd like to ask you some questions, and we may have to flip between the two exhibits, if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
Or the two document pages in the same exhibit. Now, the time of the 731 call, how many seconds was it?
17, 7:31 and 17 seconds.
So we are just 3 seconds shy of the next recording on these records associated with Mr. Williams, because it's 7:33:14, correct? There's a 2-minute minus 3-second difference. Does that sound right? All right. Now, you said, and if I misheard you, just please, I was sitting over here, just please say that you didn't say that. But you explained that there's 4 miles between where the cell tower that was used at the 7:31, 17 p.m. call to the 7:33:14 call, which is on the screen. Is that?
Yeah, I think I said between 8, or I measured it with just general measurement. I think I found like 8 or 9 kilometers, which again, I estimated to be between 4 and 5 miles.
Did you drive the distance from around the cell tower that's on the page before at 7:31:17 to the cell tower at 7:33:14?
I have not, no.
Did you Google map it? And if you use other devices, that's fine. But to see the number of miles between those two locations?
No, I just did an estimate, straight line distance estimate between those two towers.
When you say straight line, like a bird may be able to fly over
Yes,
all the
sir.
buildings? Okay.
Yeah, straight line from one to the other, not going along the roads.
Do you know the distance going along the roads between those two locations, and specifically point 2, associated address 35 Oak Street Southwest, and I used Jeffrey Williams condominium address?
I do not. I've never put them in Google Earth to see, or whatever mapping software to see the distance, driving distance. I don't know what it is.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about the sectors. You see on State's exhibit that is shown, page 28, do you see the sector pointing south? Is that?
I do.
Beta, is that what it would be called? And if it's not, just?
Yeah, they've kind of gone away from those terms. It's more like 1, 2, 3, or whatever. But yes, it's the south side sector.
Does that mean, if the records are correct and if it's working accurately, that the handset of Jeffrey Williams by 7:33:14 is beyond where that cell tower is? Is that accurate? Meaning, when I say beyond, it's further south from the cell tower that it used.
Yeah, it's probably slightly further south than the tower. Again, I think we have it on the map. You're on a map point? Okay. So again, yeah, there's that tower we're referencing here. Again, the sector, the general left and right boundaries are these. So again, that device would have to be somewhere in this general area, here, or down in this part at 7:33.
And if you just stand there 1 second, if we go back one page, I believe that would be correct, and that should be page 27. Can you just show the jurors at 7:31:17 which tower is being employed?
Yes. So we got this tower up here, and again, the south side of that tower. So down here.
Now, all those green circles, that signifies other towers along the way that's in the system of T-Mobile. Is that true?
Correct. In 2015, January of 2015.
So, and then if you could go to page 28, if you don't mind, sir. So, the connection 2 minutes later, well, whatever, 1 minute and 57 seconds later, does not use any of the other towers. Is that true?
That's correct.
All right. Okay, thank you. Now, these towers are not done for law enforcement. meaning the records, rather, they're not kept for law enforcement purposes. Law enforcement uses them and accesses them, but they're really for the internal workings of the companies trying to make the money and give the best service.
That's correct. Yeah, these are business records used by the providers on a daily basis.
Did you analyze, I know that there's an incoming call, according to these records, 17 seconds, the way you explained it, not the 47, but you explained the difference, with Mr. McMullen's device associated with him to Mr. Jeffrey Williams' device associated with him. How many times in all these records that you have did Jeffrey Williams' device ever communicate, being the initiation of a communication with Mr. Demise McMullen's device?
I'd have to reference the call logs. I don't recall off the top of my head.
Will that take a long time or no?
I could probably, if they're all back there.
It's me with the link. I
could probably review them.
was gonna mention to you guys, I've seen some talk about other cases in the trial, and if you guys are interested in Sarah Boone, that is the suitcase case. That's a little bit of a mouthful. That's a Florida case. That's East Coast. It's really running at the same time as YSL because that's in Georgia. They're in the same time zone. But Hella with Excited Utterance, she lives in Australia. She's starting 6 p.m. streams throughout the week to go over each day of the Sarah Boone trial starting today. Dolly Talk, friend of the channel, a lot of you guys know Dolly Talk as well, is co-hosting while they're going over the Sarah Boone trial stuff each and every day. So if you've been wondering how to pay attention to both trials, I think Hella is a great person to follow in general, but it's an awesomely convenient timing. Court ends for YSL, Sarah Boone starts. So I'm going to drop a link to that in the chat if you are interested in following the Sarah Boone suitcase case.
In, 2 minutes or 3 minutes.
Okay. Well, let me give you a couple, and then maybe it saves time if you're going to review them. I'd like you to tell the jurors how many times Mr. Williams' device, associated with Mr. Williams, contacted Kenneth Copeland's device associated with Kenneth Copeland. And if you know these answers, just say, I'm aware.
I don't recall that one. Again, as we've seen, there's a lot of calls and a lot of towers, so I don't recall every one of them. I'm glad or happy to review any and all of them so we make sure we get all the relevant information.
Okay.
So,
should I go on, or is it a waste of, I don't want to burden you.
I won't specifically remember any direct calls to or from an individual. I'd have to reference my notes,
Okay.
Which would also be what's presented in those toll analysis.
Okay. Well, that's going to be my questions. If it's going to take more than a minute or two, though, maybe we could do it over a break.
Yes, sir. That's great.
Okay, but if you want to take time now, Mr. McMullen, and if it helps you, Mr. Copeland, I'm going to ask you about Mrs. Zachary, Mr. Garlington's phone associated with him, Mr. Cobb's phone, Mr. Bradford's phone. So that's a lot of work.
Yeah, if it's several, I would probably like a couple minutes, so maybe over the next break might be the best.
Okay.
If that's fine. Okay.
Can you just write that down or just remember it? But that's what I'm going to ask you over the break, okay? All right, let me ask you this. Can you go to I think it's labeled Dolly, it might be Alexis, but Dolly Greer's phone calls. Do you remember a 911 call being made?
I do.
And do you remember it being for 104 seconds?
I don't remember the exact. I do remember it being longer than a minute or so. So 104 seconds seems like it's probably about correct.
Were you ever given, did the prosecution ever give you, to review in your records, ever give you that actual recording of that 911 call?
They did not.
All right. And that was on January 11th, 2015 at 12:04 a.m.?
I'd have to review the toll
I
record.
think that should be right behind you, too.
Okay. You want me to do that now?
Sure, if you don't
Okay.
mind. That's just that one, you know what I'm talking about, right?
I do, Your Honor. May I
Yes, you
review
may.
those?
And while he's doing that, I was trying to jot down, because I doubt if he was able to jot down what you wanted him to check was which names?
Mr. Cobb, Mr. Bradford, Mr. Copeland, Mr. Zachary, Mr. McMullen, Mr. Garlington,
All right,
Mr. Rontrez Brock,
Brock?
B-R-O-C-K,
Okay,
Mr. Sledge.
all right,
Thank you, Your Honor.
sure.
Were you able to refresh your memory?
I was, yes, sir.
Okay. Is it 104 seconds?
It is, yes, sir, at 12:04 a.m., just like you brought up.
Okay. And that's a call. Do you remember which cell tower that call was made from? And if yes, can you tell us what you're looking at? And then
Yeah, I'd have to review this. Okay.
And you're looking at, again, your report, which is 522Y?
532 Yankee.
Thank you.
And I should probably mention, I see Delphi being mentioned in the chat. I'm not laughing about the trial. I'm laughing about Biff's comment here. So I had shared a link to Andrea Burkhart on X. So if you want to follow her on X for updates on the Delphi trial, I put her X. I shared her YouTube yesterday, and she might do YouTube videos as well. But that trial is closed off, very limited access. And getting coverage on X after she's able to get in and out of the courtroom and give us updates, I think that's going to be a great platform to follow her. So follow her there. Delphi trial is going to be very interesting. But Biff said Andrea Burkhart is going to the trenches. Only 25 people are allowed in, and she knows MMA. She does boxing. She seems to be very good at sparring. So that is hilarious. Andrea Burkhart's going to fight her way in. Love this comment here. A lot of interesting trials, and Jennifer in the chat pointed out at this point, of course, the YSL trial is going to run concurrent with all these other trials because this is day 142. 3.
So the analysis for those devices, again, went from about 620, I think that specific device associated with Dolly Greer ending in 1990. The towers and sectors I mapped out were from 6:44 to 8:27 p.m. So I don't have in there specifically where the 911 call occurred at, which was at 12:04 a.m.
Okay, on the next morning, right after midnight.
Correct.
But that's in the records. We could do that.
We could, yes, sir.
Okay. It's going to be a longer break for you. I'm going to ask you to get to. All right. I'd like to talk with you about Mr. Copeland's cellular telephone records activity, if you don't mind, and tell us what you need to look at.
Again, I'm referencing my report, 532 Yankee, and Mr. Copeland's records start on page 10.
Do you mind showing that, if you don't mind?
Call detail records, Mr. Cope?
Your analysis, is that what you referred to?
Yes, I'm looking at the PowerPoint analysis.
What page of Berni's?
Page 10.
Thank you. Okay. So, Mr. Copeland, and you made this clear earlier with the jurors, at least you discussed it. Mr. Copeland's call at 7:01:58, you see it on the left-hand lowest
I do.
lowest number? And if you could just point that to the jurors on the screen, if you don't mind. And then show us the next
7:01.
time the phone is used, if you don't mind.
The next time the phone is used is 7:24:09, and we see the tower and sector that the phone is in this general area.
And that is approximately a 22-minute, 11-second gap. Is that, and if I did it wrong, please correct me.
No, that's a fair number. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, in that 22-minute gap, do you know where that phone was powered off?
I do not. Again, the analysis just shows the towers and sectors that were used.
Okay. Do you know something, and if you do, just explain to the jury, airplane mode, you know what that is?
I do.
Can you tell the jury? And well, did they have that in 2015?
They did. Yeah, so airplane mode, obviously, your cell phone resides on a cellular network. So when you place and receive calls, it's with cell phone towers, but you can switch your phone into what's called airplane mode. That basically limits the device, the cell phone, so it can't talk to cell phone towers. It can only be used as either a Wi-Fi device or as a computer.
What is the distance, if you can tell us, between, you see where it says CS or crime scene?
I do.
And that's the shooting of Mr. Thomas, right?
Yes, sir, it is.
The plotting, on the map, on the Google Earth. What is the distance between that and the cell tower that is the 7:01:58?
Okay. So let's see. So about 6 kilometers, which would be, I don't know, maybe 3 to 4 miles.
Okay.
3.5 to 4 miles.
And can you, and you don't know traffic conditions or road conditions on January 10th, 2015?
I do not.
Okay, is that the law and crime feed? Hello? What are we doing, law and crime? All right, so it looks like I'm going to refresh the feed. It looks like we're an hour and... It says it's playing, so why is it doing that? All right, we are an hour and 28-ish minutes behind, so let's get this going.
How do
Right.
you answer that question with your training experience?
All right, well, we got through cross-examination by the end of the day. Let's get
All the
this key
pieces
back
we
up,
have,
right? We'll go back like an hour and 30 so we get the full question.
cell phone resides on the cellular network. So when you place and receive calls, it's with cell phone towers, but you can switch your phone into what's called airplane mode. That basically limits the device, the cell phone, so it can't talk to cell phone
Okay, so it was their feed.
It can only be used as either a Wi-Fi device or as a computer.
What is the distance, if you can tell us, between, you see where it says CS or crime scene?
I do.
And that's the shooting of Mr. Thomas, right?
Yes, there it is.
The plotting, on the map on the Google Earth. What is the distance between that and the cell tower that is the 70158?
Okay. So let's see. So about 6 kilometers, which would be, I don't know, maybe 3 to 4 miles.
Okay.
3.5 to 4 miles.
And can you, you don't know traffic conditions or road conditions on January 10th, 2015?
I do not.
Okay, so I'm gonna double mess it up. All right, you guys, my bad. All right, let's just look for body motion from someone in the courtroom. Dang, so did they miss? So then there's no words there? We're just gonna be at another point. And I assumed it was me because, you know, why wouldn't it be me? Dang, how long was it freezing for? I feel like the law and crime chat was
I
probably
believe
going crazy.
the coverage area would be. And then again, you know, I just kind of measured that distance in straight line distance between my estimate of the coverage area to the crime scene's about 3 miles.
Right, but that's the tower itself, right?
So
How about the tower when it goes out, away from the tower?
yeah, so the tower to the crime scene is approximately 6 kilometers. So, and we know 5K is like 3.1 miles, so it's probably 3.5 miles. So the edge of the footprint to the crime scene, straight line distance again, because I don't know the zigzags of the roads, is probably under 5, right around 5 kilometers or under. So again, that's going to be under 3 miles. So just under 3 miles, would I say the coverage area to the crime scene in a straight line distance.
And a car that's already moving, can it go in approximately 2 minutes? And if this is just guesswork, just say, look, this is just too much. I have no idea. Could it go the distance from the crime scene to an area that would be depicted by the records of the tower that's in use here?
I mean, again, because I don't know the driving distance as opposed to the straight line distance, I think it's hard to say. Could it possibly? Maybe. I'm not sure. But I can't. I haven't driven it, and I don't know the distance, so I don't want to be able to say yes or no.
That's fair.
I don't know the road distance between the coverage area and the crime scene.
Thank you. Now, were you ever told or given records for a second or multiple cellular devices that are associated with Mr. Copeland?
I don't recall another device associated with Mr.
You
Copeland.
were just given records for one device.
I believe so. Remember, I looked at this incident, the January 15th, or January 10th, which is the first incident. But I think I looked at 4 other incidents and lots of phone numbers. So during this time period.
That's what I'm talking
Okay, I don't recall another phone number associated to Mr. Copeland.
All right. Agent Berni, I'd like to ask you, I think it's on page 24 of that same exhibit. Is that Mr. Bradford's analysis that you did when the records associated with Mr. Bradford's phone?
It is.
Okay. I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind, about a couple of calls on here, according to the records that you pulled out for us.
Yes, sir.
Do you see a call on the left-hand side lower at 8:03:54 p.m.?
I do.
And then approximately 20 seconds later at 8:04:14 p.m. using the same exact cell tower and sector?
Yes, sir.
All right. Then the next call I'd like to ask you about is on the right-hand side of your exhibit. And if you need to show anything to jurors with the honorable court's
I can.
permission. Okay.
So the two calls he's referencing are this 803 and this 804. Again, here's the tower and sector there.
And then if you go to, while you're standing, if you don't mind, on the right-hand side, you see 807:03 contact?
I do.
And can you show the jurors which sector and cell tower we're talking about?
Right here. Yep.
And then the next call on the left-hand side again is approximately a minute and 23 seconds later. Do you see that at 8:08:26?
I do.
Can you, and it's again using a different cell tower, fair to say?
It is. Yeah. So we started, what is 803 and 804 using this tower, 807, and then back to 808.
Can you explain, if you have an explanation, and I know they're just records, but how the device picked up, and I understand it can move, picked up the 807:03 at the Constitution cell tower versus the cell tower closest to number 2 on your diagram?
Yeah, when I was analyzing this records, obviously we see this and you wonder kind of the same question. So what I did was look up, again, the heights of these towers, because line of sight plays a big portion. Taller towers have a longer, higher line of sight than shorter towers do. So what I noticed, again, is that this tower is really tall one. It's about 100 and, I think it was like 130 to 140 height here. This one was still a pretty large tower. I think it was like just under 100 feet tall. So in reviewing the records, all we can say is that the device, again, which chooses the tower in the sector with the best signal, the strongest, best signal, at 8:07, it shows this tower that was out here as the best signal. And then at 8:0, all these other ones, it shows this tower. So all we can say is potentially line of sight, that this tower, which is slightly larger than this tower located here, for this one call, the signal was in a stronger signal than these towers here. Could have been a matter of somebody being in one area and then turning, and something just alters the signal strength enough that this tower, when they hit the green button to receive this or place this outgoing call, that this tower's signal strength is the same. What I would say in reviewing that, though, is obviously we will look at all the calls in the totality of the time period that we review records. And we can see in the totality, calls placed here, a significantly more number than this number here, which is one call at 8:07. So it's using this for a significant number of calls, jumps to this one at 8:07, then jumps back to this one here. Again, I work a lot of Amber Alerts, a lot of those kinds of things. If I am reviewing and these records looking for an individual, I'm concentrating on where the vast majority of calls are, and then trying to figure out why maybe we have this call at 8:07.
Can I ask you, while you're standing, hypothetically, if we didn't have all the calls that you were kind enough to generate and put into the box on the lower left, and we just were left with the one call at 8:07:03, which is on the middle right, it would make it appear, I'm not saying you would make it appear, but it would make it appear as if that handset was closest to the 8:07 cellular tower. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if we had no other calls, and this is the only call we had was at 8:07, and I was looking for an individual using this device, I'd obviously go to an area that was closer to them. But again, I would never do that, right? If I have all of the information, I'm going to use all of the information to formulate opinion. I'm not just going to use some of the information.
With regards to Mr. Bradford's device that we're looking at, does he have any calls, according to the records associated with Mr. Bradford, does he have any calls that places him with a cell phone tower where that M is, or that's a McDonald's, correct?
Yeah, there's no activity on that side of the cell phone tower.
Okay.
So,
How about Jeffrey Williams? Cell phone records? If you can look at that and just direct us to the page, I'm going to ask you the same question. How many times has Jeffrey Williams records show that he is using a cell phone tower close to the McDonald's?
Yeah, I'm referencing the same Exhibit 532 Yankee. Just trying to. So in that exhibit, page 28 would be the time period covered by the device associated with Mr. Williams.
Your Honor, can we show page 28?
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
And again, there's no tower and sector activity that would show the device to be in the vicinity of the McDonald's.
If we can go back to Mr. Copeland's records, and if you can help us with the page, I think I know it is, but just to make sure, I'd like you to tell us what page to go to.
For Mr. Copeland, device associated with him, the 5991, that's going to be page 12. Actually, page 11, I'm sorry.
Does Mr. Copeland's device, according to these records, and they vary, obviously. I mean, you're telling us that. It's not GPS coordinate, here I am, it's a range, fair to say?
Correct. We know the tower and sector where the device is. So again, a general area of where the device is.
And it could be, I guess, miles away. Is that, and if I'm saying something wrong, just please correct me.
It could be depending upon the towers in the area. Obviously, more towers, the closer the phones are to those towers. The towers that are farther apart, the more range those towers could be away from each other. On page 11, you asked about the McDonald's. This is the slide where the McDonald's is not on there, but there is a call at 7:51, which is in the vicinity of the McDonald's.
And I'm going to ask a different question while it's page 11 of that same exhibit is before the jurors. Do you see where the crime scene is?
I do.
Does Mr. Copeland's cell phone ever contact a cell phone tower that, in your expert opinion, could encompass that crime scene?
Yes, this 7:28 and 45 seconds, this one.
That is the 6-minute ping that piqued my interest earlier. Steele just harrowed in on this. Yes, this could have actually pinged in the vicinity of the crime scene.
Here. Again, we see this device was a Sprint device. So we see the towers that are listed here around the crime scene. So this device here, which is used at 7:28 p.m., you can see that here. That coverage could potentially cover the crime scene and the other locations in Green Store that's in there, because those locations are close together.
And then Mr. Copeland continues, I believe, on the next page, am I correct? Page 12, and if I'm wrong?
Correct. It does continue on page 12.
If you can go there. Is there any time on page 12 that, it's going to be the same question, Mr. Copeland's device is at or around the crime scene? Well, using a tower associated with and encompassing that crime scene.
Yeah, we have this call here at 9:52 p.m. You can see the towers right underneath this box for the crime scene. So again, that's in the vicinity of the crime scene. Put the device in this general area at 9:52 p.m.
Do you have any records that you were asked to work on and prepare for your testimony by the District Attorney's Office of Fulton County? Do you have any records that show between, let's say, 7:20 and 8:30 that Mr. Copeland's handset that are associated with the records that you targeted go towards and encompasses Jeffrey Williams condominium?
Between what time periods again?
It could be 6 in the evening on January 10th, 2015, and we'll say 10 in the evening, January 15th, 2000. January 10th, 2015.
Yeah, during that period, we do not. There is a slide in here that covers phones in the vicinity of Williams condo. That extends from 7:31 p.m. to 11:22 p.m. And where did that slide go?
And just announce what page it is when you get
44.
Thank you,
I
sir.
must have gotten my pages out of order. I don't see it.
And if you could focus on Mr. Copeland and show the jurors the time that, according to these records, that a cell phone tower is employed by Mr. Copeland's phone that are associated with the records that you've been provided at Jeffrey Williams condominium?
Yeah, so we see it right here. The phone number associated with 5991 has two events, 1114 and 1117, an outgoing and incoming call, and you can see it uses a tower right here, again, in close proximity to the Williams condo. 1114 and 1117.
And then before you sit down, do you remember the name Mr. Treadwell? Do you remember using that name?
I do, yes, sir.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen jury when Kelvin Treadwell's cellular telephone records show that he is using a tower that is in the vicinity of the Jeffrey Williams condominium?
So again, his number ends in 2643, the device associated with him. Let's see. And I don't see that. So that device must not have been in that area during that period.
You could sit down if you want. If you want to, you can stand if you want. All right. So hypothetically, if the phone was being used, because it has to be used to capture on a record, either a text message and or a telephone call in 2015.
Yes, sir.
And hypothetically, it was that the cellular telephone number associated with Mr. Copeland
Okay.
followed to Jeffrey Williams' condo between, I'm just broadening it, but 7:30 and 8:30 on January 10th, 2015, from the McDonald's to the Jeffrey Williams condo. You don't have record of that. Followed Mr. Treadwell, if I didn't say Mr. Treadwell.
So between 7:30 and 8:30, did you say?
Yes.
Yeah, there's no activity in Mr. Copeland's records that would show that during the 7:30 to 8:30 time period, he had any phone activity in the area of the Williams condo.
And the same question for those times. I think you answered it, so I don't want to waste time. Just say it's the same answer. Mr. Treadwell, same times, doesn't go up near the Jeffrey Williams condo, according to the records.
Yeah, I'll just confirm that. So my phone's in here. So again, looking at page 33 of that same report, and at no time between 7:33 and 8:33 is there activity on the device associated with Treadwell 2643 that would be in the vicinity of the Williams condo.
I would like to go to your efforts on explain to us the records showing devices associated with certain people going to Miami, Florida. So we're starting some people, and I'm not trying to confuse anyone, some people on January 11th, some people on January 12th. Is that fair to say?
It is, yes, sir.
And again, the year is 2015 for all of this.
Correct, yes,
Okay.
sir.
Now, how long did Mr. Zachary's records show that he is in the Miami, Florida area?
I don't recall how long the device was in there. Again, I was just asked to show did the device make a trip to Miami. And so that's, in my analysis, all I did. So I don't recall.
I love this witness. I was just asked to see if the device was ever in Miami. I wasn't asked to look at a time frame. Honest witness.
How long the device stayed in Miami.
Okay, and to be fair, you weren't asked, that's easy to figure out, but you weren't asked to do that by the district attorney's office. Is
That's
that-
correct.
It's going to be the same question, so I assume the same answer, but I don't want to presume. Mr. Copeland's phone.
Same answer. Again, just to review the trip down there, not necessarily say how long the device was there.
Okay, and I believe it's going to be the same, but Mr. McMullen's device, same answer?
Yes, sir.
All right. Who else besides Mr. Williams' records, Miss Dolly Greer's records, Miss Dora Greer's records? Who else did go down to Miami that we didn't discuss?
Mr. Williams.
Ignore him. Well,
Oh,
can you tell the jurors when he came back? I'm assuming.
I cannot.
Okay. Now, how about in Miami? When these records show that certain people actually made it to Miami, whomever they are, all of them, were you ever tasked or asked or requested by the district attorney's office in Fulton County to then figure out how many times did any of those devices contact Jeffrey Williams?
I was not asked.
I'm going to say Jeffrey Williams. I should be better. Jeffrey Williams' phone records associated with his phone records. You were not asked.
I was not asked to do that.
Okay. How about, were you ever asked to pinpoint, like you did in your exhibits, Once in Miami, does Jeffrey Williams' cellular telephone records show that he is using a cell tower near and in the vicinity of person's cell records, such as associated with Mr. Copeland, Mr. Zachary, Mr. McMullen, Mr. Cobb, whomever else? Were you asked to do that?
I wasn't asked to specifically map or analyze that. I did kind of review that when obviously they arrived, and that was part of my mapping process. They're in a similar area when they arrived, but again, that was just at the time that they arrived.
Okay.
So,
Did you ever get any details that Mr. Williams stayed at a location the same as Mr. Copeland, Mr. McMullen, or whomever, or a different location? And if you don't know, just say, I was never asked that, I was never given that information.
yeah, I don't have any of that information.
All right. Okay. Your Honor, may I have just a moment?
Sure.
Thank you. Agent, I'll be right back, okay?
Okay, and just to trying to tie in some context here, and I'm not fully grasping the entire theory line. Not theory line, but what Steele is dismantling. I think more of that will be dismantled when we get detectives talking more about why they thought certain people were in the same place at the same time. But Woody had told police. We heard a lot of conversation questions from Bryant Steele, like, okay, wait a minute. So you looked at the device associated with Calvin Treadwell, aka OG Bentley. His cell phone, his device isn't really in the vicinity of Jeffrey Williams' condo, right? So he's not over there. Same thing, we asked the same question about Kenneth Copeland. There's no activity showing that Kenneth Copeland was near or following wherever Mr. Treadwell was moving around that night. We also, from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., don't have anything that would show that the device associated with Kenneth Copeland was in the vicinity of Jeffrey Williams' condo. But Kenneth Copeland had told police in one of the interviews that he thought Bentley, OG Bentley, Calvin Treadwell, Shannon Stillwell, and Jeffrey Williams were involved in Donovan Thomas's murder. So I'm trying to piece some of that together. I think it's interesting that of the certain people in the placements, Brian Steele is focused on OG Bentley, who is not indicted, not charged here. So I'm going to keep racking my brain, but throwing that out there, see what you guys make of it.
Were you ever asked about January 12, 2015, approximately 1:30 in the afternoon, when an Infinity rental car was returned to the airport, the Atlanta airport? Were you ever given that information?
I don't recall that, no.
By
Oh.
January, I may have messed up the date, by January 11th, 2015, in the afternoon hours, is Jeffrey Williams' records have him on the way traveling to Miami, Florida,
At what time?
1:30ish.
Yeah, so there's activity around 1:30 a.m. on the 11th in Atlanta. And then the next activity outside of Atlanta is approximately 4:38 a.m. on the 11th.
And that would be,
South, near Macon, Georgia.
okay. Do you ever know whether Mr. Copeland's, the records that you have, I'm not talking about any other record, just the records that you were given, that Mr. Copeland's phone, was he in the area of Atlanta on January 11th, 2015 at 1:30 in the afternoon?
So again, in reviewing he has phone activity in Atlanta at 7:56 p.m. on the 11th. And then the first time there's activity outside of Atlanta is at 10:12 p.m. on the 11th. And again, that's south of Macon, Georgia.
Okay. All right. Yeah, just one second.
It'd be interesting if there was some recross. And also, shout out, happy birthday to Bay. I had it up on the screen, waiting for a break. You guys are saying happy birthday in the chat. And then I forgot myself. So big shout out to all our birthdays in the building. Bay is celebrating today. And my guess is that Steele is going for the, if you listen to some of what Woody said, why didn't you look at and charge Treadwell? If you wanted Jeffrey Williams, like what's the difference? Why were you going after Jeffrey Williams, Shannon Stillwell, but not Treadwell, if Copeland also said he was involved?
Okay, Your Honor, may I just ask one serious question? I'd like to just ask you a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
And if you don't have this expertise, just say, I don't know. When we use and I use the 7:22 p.m. 911 call on January 10th, 2015, when Mr. Thomas's report of the shooting,
Yeah, I recall that, yes.
do you know how much time passed between the actual shooting and the actual 911 call being made?
I do know.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir.
And Mr. Steele, are you going to want him to check?
Yes.
Okay. Do you mind if we just
No.
have whatever other cross there is?
No, not at
before
all.
we break? Okay. Mr.